Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to do a little bit of a different intro today. You know the guest that's beside me today. You think you know him, but we're going to go about it a little different today. You think you know Buff Bagwell. From a Hall of Fame worthy wrestling career to today, Marcus Alexander Buff Bagwell has been in the public spotlight for most of his life. The Buff Bagwell stories are told and shared daily. The impact that Buff had on professional wrestling cannot be denied. As a trailblazer, Buff created an iconic image that fans love and influenced a legion of new wrestlers since. But do you really know Buff? Today we're taking off the top hat, and I want to introduce you to somebody else. His name is Marc Bagwell. Marc, welcome to your wrestling docuseries, The Real Marc Bagwell.
It is so nice to meet you. And God, what a great feeling it is to not have to be Buff Bagwell, to be just Marc. And
yeah,
that's just, that just means a lot to me. That's who I am. That's who all the guys fell in love with. That's who Sting and WCW guys and WWF never had a chance because they never got a chance to meet Marc. But I would wish they could have, had a chance to meet Marc, or I could have had a great run there. But, it is what it is. But at the same time, it is, it's nice to be, it's good. It feels great just to be Marc Bagwell, just to be me, just be me. Well, the gray beard, not worried about, dyeing my beard and just having to be that persona, so, everybody, they think I got this painted on. It's still my goatee. It's just, you gotta, when we get older, we gotta dye our beards,
I hear you, buddy. And I got that beard shaver, and I try to get it down to like a number one, number two. And as soon as you get down to enough, it's not that great. But you know what? You learn. It's funny. I had this own perception. And I turned into my 40s. Gray. I don't like it. But it's so funny. I'd be salt and pepper. It looks amazing. And I'm like, wow, maybe I'll just embrace it. I'll be who I am. Well,
let me tell you a little story that's kind of interesting. On my car wreck I had in 2012, where I nearly killed myself, flipping my Jeep. Go figure, I'm in the wrestling world and I almost kill myself in car wrecks all the time. But it was a Jeep wreck I had in 2012. And what made this one so dramatic was it was, with me, there's always a crazy story and it's always the truth. And that's what makes it even crazier but what happened is my manager at the time he was all about pro wrestling. He was about trying to make pro wrestling into a professional industry. And I said, bro, there's no way to do it. There's at WCW and WWF, especially to the independent world. Wow, just look at my arm, brother. Anyway, I said, there's no way to make this professional. There's just not. You're just going to have to deal with the trash, the bad promoters, the can't see you last minute, the guys that are great, the guys that are, not great, all that stuff. But he convinced me to change my number and I was going to go to work for him. And his name was Hamilton Taylor. And so I did so. I changed my number. He falls in his house and dies. And I find him dead in his house. I walk in and the alarm key to the thing was my birthday. So I said that he lives in a multi-million-dollar home on West Paces Ferry Road in Atlanta. And I kind of took over, all of his help that did the pool and the yard and everything. I kind of ran his house. I was kind of his caretaker. Okay. And that's what it ended up being on accident, because he just didn't want to deal with nobody. He was a very, very, who's the guy? And then they made the movie after that, flew the big plane, and he was real, a big, I guess, germs. And Howard Hughes.
Yes.
Howard Hughes.
Yes.
And so he was very Howard Hughes like. Wow. Like thinking something's going to get him. There's going to be germs. There's this, there's that. So long story short, I come in to play in this guy's life during this time, but we change my number, we change everything, and he dies. And I find him dead at his house. And so now, 7 days after that is when I have my car wreck. So I've got a manager that's died. I've changed my phone number, and I have a car wreck where people don't know if I'm alive, if I'm dead, or where I'm at, or anything. And they got no way to get in touch with me. And I called my new manager that I'd hired, and I said, bro, we've got to shake it up. And it's the only thing I know how to do. And that is, we got to do something different. We got to really shake it up here. And so guess what came into play?
What?
Gigolos.
Oh boy.
That's where that came up.
Really? Okay.
So that's how that whole thing happened, for everybody out there that wonders how that happened or why it happened. It happened because I fell off the map and nobody knew how to get in touch with me or knew if I was alive still. But I'd got back into shape and gotten big again and was ready to wrestle, but nobody knew how to get in touch with me. So in comes the Gigolo show that I do one episode, and it was the highest rated episode show they ever had in 5 years. And all of a sudden my phone started ringing. So ultimately it did work without too much heat. It really did work. And that's where all that came from, though, was because nobody knew how to get in touch with me. And we had to shake it up a little bit to get something going. So that's where that entered, which a lot of people don't know that story, but that is the story of where Gigolos happened. And so long story short from there was, everybody was constantly trying to get, find a way to help me and figure out a way to, do away with Buff Bagwell and be Marc Bagwell, because Marc Bagwell is really who I am. I'm Marc. I mean, this is Marc talking to you right now. And Marc Bagwell is who, is really just a spinoff of who Buff is. Buff's just Marc Bagwell turned up a notch, or a couple notches. And that's all that is. And that's how every wrestler is. Ric Flair is Ric Flair turned up a couple notches. DDP is, Dallas Page turned up a couple notches. I mean, it's all it is. We just turned up a couple notches, and that's our character and TV world. And that's how that all comes about. But yeah, it's nice to, just to be Marc Bagwell and talk as Marc and be Marc. And that's what we're trying to do with Dallas. And he's trying to show that, lose the hat and lose, quit worrying about dyeing your beard and just be Marc, because you're just the coolest guy in the world. He goes, bro, you're the kind of guy that, you want to buy a beer with, hang out with, chill out with, but you're just, you put all this stuff on it and you try to keep it going, which it's hard for me to do, to let that go, because for years I've had to keep that persona of Buff Bagwell and, stay in the gym, keep my body right, keep my, my goatee perfect, my, everything just right, and it's not necessarily that the fans want to meet, they want to know Marc, so that's what this is all about. And I thank you for doing it. It's great.
My pleasure. And Marc, I got to tell you, that was a spectacular story to show the segue as far as where you could be at life, and then you gotta just change it up. And that's where I feel you're at the point today. And the ironic thing about it is I feel like there's two camps here. There was you and I in one camp in our type of thinking, and I know there's other fans that had it as well, and Dallas and the majority of fans. And you were 3 episodes on my podcast, The Chosen Life, as Buff, and we covered up a lot of Buff stories, had great times, shared real insights. And when you brought it to me, like, you and I talk off air, and we become good friends through this, which I very much value, your friendship and your brotherhood.
Oh, tremendous.
And you're telling me, Dallas raised the fact that, maybe we're going to go more with Mark, and, maybe less Buff. And I said, Buff is the stuff, man. Buff is like, look behind me, look at the pose, it's
right.
That's a thing. But I went back after our 3rd episode, and I went back and read those comments, and Mark, 99% of those fans were saying, we want to see Mark. We want to take off the hat. We want to see his eyes, nose shades. We want the real Mark. And that's where I came to you, and I said to you, Mark, I have an idea, man. You're too big of a star, and you're too, you've already graduated from The Chosen Life. I want to give you a wrestling docuseries. When we bring you on, I want to have your real story, the real Mark, and understand, that being a celebrity, a star, you wake up in the morning like everybody else, and you eat your breakfast, and, you go to the bathroom and put on your jeans, go to doctor's appointments.
Yes.
People, and that relatability, that's who I fell in love with as a brother, getting to know the real Mark. And I think myself,
right.
I got to know Mark. I want people to pull up a chair and sit with Mark and I the way we talk off air.
Yes. That, oh my God, can you imagine? Well, last night, for example, yes. A guy called me up, and he had no idea it was my number. I mean, he knew it was my number, or he was expected it was my number, but he didn't think I would answer.
Right.
And he said, "Is this Buff Bagwell?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Oh my God, you answered your phone." And I said, "Well, my phone rang, so yeah, I answered it." And he was like, "Oh my God, dude, you're Buff Bagwell." I said, "No, I'm Marc Bagwell." I said, I answered my phone, and it was nice. I said, "Thank you for being a fan." And and the guy was really cool. He didn't hold me long. He wasn't, digging and trying to, fit in and all that. He was really just a really cool guy, and just a big fan, and just was really, really, really thankful that Marc Bagwell took a few minutes out of his time just to talk to him,
I gotta tell you, one of the first times we messaged each other, and you got this cool thing that's very proper and very professional and etiquette wise that very few people do anymore. Texting has turned conversations into the shitter, basically, and people just flack it off. Mark always signs off his name, that's like a letter. But the first time I saw the sign off Mark, I'm like, Mark, who's Mark?
Right.
What?
Right.
Because usually you sign it off Buff, and I'm like, huh. So tell me something. When did Marcus Alexander, then Buff, when did he embrace Mark?
It's according still, I'm in the process of that, but it's still according to who I'm talking to. Like, if I'm talking to you, now that we've crossed into the Buff Mark area in our relationship, you'll never receive a text that says Mark. I sign all my texts. You'll never receive one that says Buff. It'll always say Mark now. But if a fan that's got me booked says, "Hey, Buff, just checking on the flights to make sure you're good to go for the flights this weekend," I sign every text, and I'll say, "Hey, I got the information. We're good to go. See you. I'll call you on Friday to go over everything. Buff." So there's still times I use Buff and times I use Mark, because of there's people that want to talk to Buff, and there's people that want to talk to Mark. So I'm trying to find the happy medium right now, and it's kind of hard, to do that. And at the same time, it's interesting to me to see who really, really is going to hang with Marc Bagwell, the true person that got me here, and the person that created, Buff Bagwell is Mark. And, Buff is just a name. Marc Bagwell is who the person behind the hat and everything is Marc Bagwell. So, but that is to answer your question, why, if for starters, who do you know? And I know the answer already. It's nobody. Who do you know that signs their text? Nobody. But let me ask you a question.
Sure.
How many letters have you ever written that you have not signed?
Maybe one that was made out of newspaper clippings and gloves,
right.
but that's about it. No, I would never do that.
Right. So what is a text? It is a form of a letter.
True.
Why wouldn't you sign it? I don't know why everybody don't sign it. I want to know people know that it's me that's saying this. So that's where me signing my name, whether it be Buff or Marc, came from, was just to be, just to be straight up with everybody on, hey, this is who you're talking to, And I never, it just, to me, I don't know, it just felt weird to me to type something and send it, even though there's contacts and they know it's your line and they know it's you it's coming from. It still could be anybody typing those words. I want to sign it Marc or Buff, whatever it may be, on letting people know who this is coming from. And that's why I assign all of my text.
An interesting term just came into my mind as you speak. It's funny because I have little notes of myself where I think we're going to go with our conversation, but then things always progress as they do naturally, right?
Oh, yeah.
The term Southern gentleman. It comes to my
head. Oh, my
head.
God, stop. Don't say another word. My dad's favorite thing on the face of the planet. My father was a self-made millionaire, and we grew up filthy rich, and he went broke my senior year. And I've told you the story. I've told every podcast this story several times. But long story short, we were filthy rich growing up from having a lumber company. And my dad he always wanted there to be a book written on him called, I can't remember exactly. It was either Tales or, A Life of a Southern Gentleman. And that's just, it's a true story. I mean, my dad believes that we should have been cowboys. He thinks that our generation just missed being cowboys. We were, because he watches cowboy movies. It's all he watches, John Wayne and Clint Eastwood and all that stuff. And he feels like with all of his heart that we as his sons should have been like Yellowstone or some kind of cowboy related world that we lived in, where it was gunfighting and, land and power and, strength and power and, and land and cows and, horses and he just feels like we just barely missed that in our generation. And I feel the same, because we all loved guns. We were big gun freaks and gun, people. And we were big deer hunters. And so we didn't miss it by far regardless. But the long and the short of it was, he always wanted to be a book called, Tales or The Life of a Southern Gentleman. That's weird you said that.
The reason I say it, I noticed something very clear, and I don't know if it's an Atlanta thing or Georgia thing. I think it is. That's where the term came from.
Oh, yeah.
People don't understand, they see on wrestling and you're like clubbing people with chairs and 2x4s and things like that. And, flexing and smiling when you're doing it. But Marc Bagwell is a Southern gentleman. Like, you have manners. You're always, please, thank you. Sorry if I'm late. I'll be a little early. How are you doing today? What's going on with your life? Like, you were clearly raised in my mind with manners. because you
Yes.
really care about the other person, and you're always putting other people before you. I know no matter what's going on with your life, no matter, you know, how tired you may be, or you're running to events, you never fail to stop and check how I'm doing. You remember
No.
things that we talked about previously. That's called manners. And you're
Yes.
bringing etiquette and manners back to society. And I commend you on that, because I don't think people realize that enough.
I appreciate that. And that comes from having two great parents. I've got to give my parents, you know, the just for that and the thanks for that, because they raised us correctly. I mean, we were like I said, we were a very rich family, but we were spoiled, but we were not spoiled brats. We took care of all of our stuff, or it got taken away from us. I mean, we were taught to take care of our stuff and respect it and be thankful for it and know that what we had was different. And so when I got put in the wrestling world of making, you know, 750 to $1 million a year, you know, it was the same thing. It was respect. I mean, to the point where I don't care where I ever got my mail handed to me in my mansion during the heyday of wrestling.
Right.
And when I got my mail and my check was in there, no matter where I was at, I would at least, no matter how busy I was, I would at least go to one knee and I would say a small prayer, because I knew that that was different. It was not, that was very lucky. It was very fortunate that I was able to make that kind of money doing what I was doing. And, you know, God, higher power, however you want to talk about it, is, to me, it's God, but people may want to talk higher power or whatever. And that is, you know, it was definitely something that was given to me. And through, you know, whether it be through hard work, regardless, it was something that was very fortunate that happened in my life. And so to me, I felt like I had to give something back, and I would at least go to a knee and say a prayer to God and make sure that he at least knew that I knew that check that was in my hand was rare. And it was very, very, very blessed and very, very thankful that I had that. And it wasn't just like, hey, you know, here's my check. Look at me. I'm rolling. Cash this, you know. It was always a very, very respected thing. And that just comes from the way we were raised, I think.
And if we're going to talk about the real Marcus Bagwell, when Marcus comes into this world, he's born to parents. We know Judy, or we think we know Judy, but there's also, I believe he went by Big Steve or Buff Daddy's daddy. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, Big Steve.
Big Steve. But I think in the background, he had the nickname as well as Buff Daddy's daddy. That's how people came to know him in a day. But Big Steve, tell us about because when I picture Big Steve, I picture 6'7", carrying lumber on his back. Like, what was Big Steve like as a pop?
His dad was, 6'4". My dad was 6'3". I'm the baby. I mean, my mom was 6'1". Okay. You know, when she was alive, she was 6'1".
Judy was 6'1".
I'm a truthful 5'11", and that's being, I mean, like if I got professionally measured, height is not a issue with me. It doesn't bother me to be smaller or shorter. That doesn't affect me, because I never claimed to be tall. I always claimed to be buff. And I stayed in shape and was buffed, you know, but I never claimed to be tall. And so, but when you talk about like my father's name was Big John.
Because we got Big John, and then he was the father of Big Steve.
He was 6'4", and, you know, 6'5", and, you know, and just, you know, but then again, his mother was called, her name was Edna, and she was called Big Ed. She was 90 pounds, but she carried 2 guns with her and had about 20K with her at all stages. She did not go anywhere without not having about $20,000 with her. And so they were the kind of family that had the first riding lawnmower, the first color TV, and people would come from all around to see the first furnace that had heat coming from the basement that blew heat up through the grills of the house, and you had to be careful when you walked over them not to burn your feet. And so, it was I grew up in a very pivotal time of learning all this, and people seeing a riding lawnmower and thinking it was great, or seeing, air conditioning and color televisions. And my parents had that, So, and then my parents give us 17 years of a great life as well. It was a lot of fun.
I'm really scared to ask. I don't know if you can say this on the air or not, but Big John and Big Ed, your dad's parents, your grandparents, what did they do for a living that she's carrying around the 20K? Is that
they were the lumber business also.
Oh, they were in the
yeah.
Oh, so the Bagwells go back in the lumber business.
Oh yeah. They actually what happened is my dad and his father kind of had words. And so my father opened up his own lumber company, and they kind of went to battle against his own father over lumber, the lumber business. Because back then there wasn't a Home Depot, there wasn't a Lowe's, there wasn't those kind of things.
There was the
Bagwells. So there were lumber yards, So the Bagwells went to war, kind of like Yellowstone or whatever. That's back to my dad thinking we should have been cowboys. Back to that, it was like we were, in war against family over the lumber business, and it just turned out to be kind of a career that my dad. Literally, my father opened up Southeastern Building Supply, and he literally would take an order, answer the phone. He would take an order, hang the phone up. Him, my mother, and another guy that helped him, James Parker, my dad's best friend, they would go out, forklift, load the truck, strap it down, lock the store up, deliver the lumber, drop the lumber, come back, open the store back up, and answer the next phone call. All the way to becoming $1 million a month empire.
So what was Thanksgiving dinner like when they were at war?
Well, we believe it or not, we put it to the side. Now my grandfather died when I was 3, and I would think I would be available, remember him some, but I have no recollection of him. The only recollections I really remember having is a little bit at 4 and a lot at 5. But he died when I was 3. So I never, even though he held me in his arms and I was part of his life, I never really met or knew my grandfather.
And Big
on
Ed?
My dad's side, I knew my mom's father, and he was he was a total opposite as far as power. He was a 9-to-5er, worked his job, clocked in, clocked out, where my dad's side of the family were power freaks. They were, strength and power, and who's got the most power, who's got the most money, and just it was about power. And that's where my name comes from. Marcus is leader of men is what Marcus means, and Alexander means great warrior. So my dad came up with that name because of just being a power freak, and he just was he was real big on power, and we had power, I mean, he owned Marietta when I grew up, as I was growing up. And maybe if I got pulled over, it was like, oh, hey, Mark, see you later, just be careful, because he owned it.
It's amazing how,
and
I was going to say, it's amazing how he set the name and set the course for you almost for your future. Leader of men, great warrior. Buddy, he was right on the money.
Hey, and listen to this. Thor was in the basket of names. Thor, and give me the hammer and all that.
As a first name?
Yes. His friend almost talked him into naming me Thor. He said, look, man, we'll give him a big hammer and everything. We'll call him Thor. So that'd been really cool to be your real name be Thor and me be a wrestler. So it was like I was going to be a wrestler from jump. It was just weird. I mean, let's put it this way. Everybody that went to school with me that heard I was a professional wrestler was like, oh my God, that's perfect. I mean, that's right up your alley. I mean, oh my God, so it wasn't like a big shocker that I became a pro wrestler to the people that grew up with me,
I can only imagine Thor Alexander and trying to convince people that that's your real name.
Right? Incredible. Oh my God, have the hammer.
That's right. Well, we'll get it's a perfect, you segued perfectly into the next chapter as far as what I wanted to discuss today. We will get back to Big Steve and your upbringing, definitely, because there's a lifetime of stories there.